Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Well, the attacks on the Second Amendment and the right of lawful gun owners to exercise their Second Amendment rights, those attacks continue unabated. And they continue to get cleverer, a little more clever and a little more clever, and a little stupider every time they do it. Let's go to San Jose, California.
A proposal would require all gun owners in the city of San Jose to carry liability insurance. Supporters say it's a good step, but critics believe that it's unnecessary. This afternoon, a sweeping policy proposal from the mayor of the nation's 10th largest city.
We recognize, although we're a city of 1.1 million, we're in a much larger country with 300 million guns.
Mayor Sam Liccardo's initiative would require all firearm owners in San Jose to carry liability insurance for their weapons. If approved, city officials say it would be the first such requirement in the country. Gun owners who are unable to pay the insurance could pay a fee to compensate taxpayers for the cost of firearm violence in the city. In response, the NRA released a statement saying, in part, criminals are already ignoring California's more than 800 gun laws, so it's doubtful many of them would rush out and get liability insurance. But even if they did, liability insurance won't cover criminal acts. Evan Bishop, owner of the Bullseye Bishop Gun Shop in San Jose, believes the ordinance penalizes law-abiding gun owners. He says the focus should be on issues like mental health.
We're talking about criminals and those type of things and people with mental health issues. Those are the things that need to be looked at so we can cut it off before it gets to an issue or they get into the firearms get into their hands, that type of stuff.
So is the proposal legal? Law experts say it could face a challenge.
I think the answer to that is it will depend on whether it in fact keeps guns out of people's hands or whether it's a reasonable tax.
Down the road, the city could also ask voters to impose a sales tax on gun and ammunition purchases to help fund gun safety classes, gun violence prevention programs, and victim assistance services. The mayor doing what he says is necessary to reduce the harms of firearms.
This proposal is not simply about stopping gun violence tomorrow. It is about ensuring the public no longer pays for the cost of gun violence.
So firearm owners only in San Jose, California. Now remember, the Second Amendment covers everybody in the United States. But firearm owners in a very specific municipality, San Jose, California, under this proposal will be required to have liability insurance for their weapons in the hopes of reducing the harm and public cost of gun violence. But this plan clearly faces some difficulties in mandating insurance for gun owners, not only because of opposition from gun owners and the National Rifle Association and other gun rights advocates, but also because the insurance industry has typically offered narrow liability coverage for shootings. I was curious about my own homeowner's policy, so I dug it out. And under the section Liability Losses We Do Not Cover, Section 1, Coverage E, Personal Liability, and Coverage F, Medical Payments to Others, do not apply to bodily injury or property damage which is expected or intended by any insured or which is the foreseeable result of an act or omission intended by the insured, but this exclusion does not apply to bodily injury resulting from the use of reasonable force by any insured to protect persons or property. So if I'm using reasonable force to protect my property, and there is liability for bodily injury or property damage, the fact I was using reasonable force by any insured to protect those persons or property covered by this policy, the policy will cover it. But the policy does not cover me for liability for any criminal acts, regardless of whether or not I am charged with those criminal acts. So if I, for example, I'm trying to think of an example. If I just randomly shoot somebody, but it's not in defense of my property, it's a homicide of some sort. It's either manslaughter or it's first, second, or third degree murder. Liability for that does not attach, and the policy will not cover that for that criminal act, regardless of whether or not a DA intends or ultimately prosecutes me or not. If the insurance company deems what I did to be a criminal act, no coverage. So the bottom line is, for my own homeowner's policy, if I am reasonably defending my property, I am covered. But let's go back to what the mayor's proposing. The coverage that does exist in most policies tends to apply to accidents, and most industry experts say that there's been very little interest among insurers in covering intentional acts of gun violence. Intentional acts of gun violence is different from an intentional act of gun violence that I commit when I am taking or using reasonable force to protect my property. Do you get the distinction? The insurance company is willing to cover me and liability for me if I am using my weapon, my firearm, in a reasonable manner against a reasonably perceived threat, and it causes bodily injury to me or somebody in the house, whatever. I'm covered. That's different from covering intentional acts of gun violence, whatever the hell that means. Intentional acts of gun violence, in my opinion, is when I go out and I intentionally rob somebody, an armed robbery, and I actually shoot somebody, or I get pissed off at somebody and I go out and kill them with a gun. That's an intentional act of gun violence, and criminal acts are not covered under my policy. Now, why would a insurance company, unless they think they can find somebody that's going to actually pay the outlandish premium, why would an insurance company agree to cover somebody for an intentional criminal act? I would also question whether or not that would be legal, because general contract law, and an insurance policy is nothing more than a contract. It just happens to be a contract of insurance. But it's a contract between me and the insurance company. General contract law says that you cannot contract for an illegal purpose. In other words, I cannot, let's take the obvious, contract to kill. I cannot hire somebody, and quite frankly, who would put it in writing, but I guess some numbnuts would. I cannot enter into a written contract that says I will pay you X number of dollars to go kill somebody. That's an illegal contract. So I'm not certain that an insurance company can write a policy, and maybe one of you lawyers out there can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think an insurance company can write a policy that says, I will cover you for this premium if you go out and kill somebody on purpose, if you commit an act of crime. There's already an exemption for a criminal act in my policy. So why would they then say, okay, your insurance, your homeowner's policy is, say, $2,000 a year. But for $12,000 a year or $100,000 a year, we'll cover you if you intentionally commit a crime. It's absurd to think that the insurance companies would do that. James Lynch, who is a chief actuary and vice president of research and education at the Insurance Information Institute, the III, says, I have not seen any groundswell among insurers to offer that kind of product. You can require someone to buy insurance, he says, but you cannot require an insurance company to sell the product. Oh, wait a minute. Haven't we heard this argument before? Let's go back to Obamacare and the John Roberts decision. What did John Roberts do? Chief Justice John Roberts ignored the requirement to buy a product and instead focused on the tax and said that the requirement to buy a product was a tax. I think the mayor's playing games here when he says, okay, so if we can get this proposal passed in San Jose, and if you can't afford the insurance because the premium's going to be outrageous, then you can just pay a tax. He's trying to play the Obamacare game, and I don't think it's going to pass. But there is one law professor that I've read about that sees a path where state regulators, though not necessarily cities, could mandate the insurance industry toward providing expanded coverage for shootings. Now, I don't have a clue how they would do that or what that would entail, but I can guarantee you this. If the insurance companies are mandated by state insurance commissioners to provide coverage for whatever gun violence means, I don't know how the hell you define gun violence, the premiums for that will be outrageous. Now, this mayor envisions a requirement for liability insurance that would cover accidental shooting incidents, but also intentional acts by people who steal or borrow a gun from a gun owner. Intentional conduct by the policyholder would not be covered. The mayor said this in a statement. Under current Supreme Court rulings, the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution protects the right to keep and bear arms. However, the Constitution does not require taxpayers to subsidize that individual choice. Time out. I have owned guns since I was 10 years old, when my grandfather gave me my first .22 long rifle. Those guns, which is an individual choice, why should taxpayers? The Constitution does not require taxpayers to subsidize that individual choice. How have other taxpayers subsidized my choice? Because my choice to own guns under the Second Amendment, or under the right of natural defense, whichever you want to use, my choice to own guns has never cost the taxpayers a nickel. So the taxpayers are not subsidizing my choice in any way. Then the mayor does this. He noted that with car insurance, the insurance industry encourages and rewards safe driving behavior. And then he pointed out that tobacco is taxed to discourage risky behavior and to help offset the public health costs of smoking-related illnesses and deaths. I have been told my entire life that driving is a privilege. Driving is not a right. Now, I might argue that differently, but for the sake of the mayor's point, let's take, for the sake of argument, the long-established premise that driving is a privilege and not a right. The right to keep and bear arms is a right that the United States Constitution and Supreme Court precedent says is an individual right that belongs to me. I have a right to keep and bear arms. I would even argue that the Supreme Court has not gone far enough because it says shall not be infringed. And before all you others that go, well, every other right has had limitations put on it by the court and by legislatures, well, I think that's wrong because I am an absolutist. Congress shall make no law abridging the right to free speech. Shall make no law. And the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So don't give me the car insurance analogy because a car is not a right. A car is not protected by the United States Constitution. Now, I might make an argument that the right to travel and therefore a car, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. The mayor says these successful public health models, being the car and smoking, by the way, cigarettes. Is smoking a cigarette a right? Now, the manufacturing of a cigarette may or may not be a right, but do I have a right to smoke a cigarette? Apparently I don't, because everywhere I turn, if I wanted to smoke a cigarette, I'm limited. Now, I don't smoke, but if I want to smoke, and I'm working in a building in downtown Denver, most buildings say I have to be 50 feet or X number of yards or whatever before I can smoke. So they've limited that right. So I don't know that cars and tobacco are good analogies. Now, the draft ordinance calls for mandating the insurance requirements for city residents. But if approved by the city council, the requirements would not be implemented right away. Instead, because here's what they do, the proposal would direct city staff to explore the specifics of how the requirements might be implemented and to come back to the council with a recommendation. Now, his measure would also call on the city staff to look into establishing a fee that gun owners could pay as an alternative to carrying the required insurance coverage, or in the event the coverage is not available. Notice how they're trying to cover all their bases. Oh, so what we're going to do is, if there is no insurance available, we still want to tax gun owners for exercising their constitutional right within the municipal boundaries of the city of San Jose. Does that tax apply to me as a non-citizen if I travel into San Jose? If I fly into the San Jose airport, am I now required upon arrival to pay a tax because I'm going to bring a weapon with me? And don't even get me off on California's laws. By the way, if I want to travel to California with a gun, I can do it. Whether I fly or drive or I hitchhike, I can take a gun into California. There are certain requirements that I report to the local sheriff and, tell him I have a gun, blah, blah, blah. But I can do that. Are we now going to restrict that right? He says the fee proceeds would go to helping cover public costs tied to gun violence like emergency medical services. I hate to break it to the people of San Jose. You're already paying for those services. You already pay property taxes, sales taxes, and who knows what other kinds of taxes within the city limits of San Jose to cover emergency medical services, to provide for firefighters and EMTs, and to provide for ambulances. You already pay those taxes. Now, the proposed ordinance would also direct the staff to examine the possibility of a ballot measure that would ask voters to decide on imposing a tax on firearms and ammunition. Now, why are we doing this? What's prompted this? An irrational, emotional reaction to two children from San Jose were among the 3 people killed by a gunman last month at that garlic festival in Gilroy, California. Since the Gilroy shooting, you had the gunman kill 22 people at a Walmart in El Paso, and the other shooter killed 9 people in Dayton. So these last mass shootings have prompted new calls for lawmakers to take action to curb gun violence. Let's think about this one in particular. Is this insurance requirement or this tax going to be paid by the criminals? Of course it's not. So once again, we have an attempt to limit the rights of law-abiding citizens in response to actions by criminal citizens. I've had it with this, but you got to pay attention to it. You've got to pay attention because this is exactly how they go about limiting your Second Amendment rights. We already have numerous companies. Now, the National Rifle Association, they had their, I forget what it was called. They had some sort of policy. I forget what their policy was called. Carry Guard. It was called Carry Guard. That insured law-abiding citizens that wanted to buy an insurance policy from the NRA, I forget who it was underwritten by, to defend you for the lawful use of your gun. Well, that has been withdrawn in the state of California because the NRA, this is the second day in a row I've picked on the NRA failed to get the written requirement from the California Department of Insurance to offer that insurance policy in the state of California. So the California Department of Insurance issued a cease and desist order. So the NRA withdrew those policies and withdrew the sale of those policies in California. Now, I may or may not be right on this, but I also think the NRA has dropped carry guard altogether. But I may be wrong about that, but it seems in the back of my mind, I think that they've done that. But the bottom line is, you can get insurance from any number of organizations to cover your defense costs if you have to pull your weapon, you have to use your weapon, any sort of self-defense. There are companies out there now that will offer you that coverage. But to offer coverage just to own the weapon, that's the distinction. The policies you can buy now are for the use of your weapon. San Jose wants to impose an insurance requirement simply to possess your weapon. I think it's blatantly unconstitutional. But it's another attempt in reaction, in an irrational reaction, to try to limit your Second Amendment rights. I don't know why I find this particular story funny, but Steny Hoyer, who is the House Majority Leader, he's a congressman from Maryland. He's been there forever. He was there back when I was there. He's holding a press conference about gun control. And a reporter from CNN not interrupts, but asks a question. If you don't believe that CNN is singularly focused on the impeachment of Donald Trump, listen to this exchange.
Another development has happened over the recess, and that now a majority of your caucus supports moving forward with an impeachment inquiry.
This is not about impeachment.
But Jerry Nadler said last week that the House is now currently in formal impeachment proceedings. Do you agree with that?
Look, this is. I want to stay focused.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I want to tell people who there is grassroots support across this country. This Sunday, in every state across the country, Mom Demands Action, the Brady Group, other guns will hold a rally in every single state. So those that care, those that want people to hear that they give a damn, excuse my language, get out there, show them, tell their senators it's time to act. Let's show that grassroots movement from one coast to the other coast and in the heart of the Midwest.
And let's stay focused.
Stay focused, too.
Thank you very much.
Stay focused. Let's stay focused. I just find that absolutely hilarious. CNN is, they've got OCD. They have this obsessive-compulsive disorder about the impeachment of Donald Trump. So here's Steny Hoyer and a group of Democrats standing around. They've got some sign about, it's hashtag do something. Hashtag do something. And it's a firearms regulations and background check presser. And all CNN can do is they want to ask about impeachment. And it pisses off Steny Hoyer. Some female Democrat congressman says, hey, can I say something? And she just blurts out everything about Moms Demand Action. And Steny Hoyer comes back and says, now let's stay focused, and just completely ignores the CNN reporter. They don't want to go anywhere near impeachment, the Democrats. Well, I should say the Democrat leadership. CNN, meanwhile, needs to get on medication. I have a friend who has OCD, and he takes medication for it, and it has literally changed his life. So CNN, if you need a referral, I can get you one. I'll be right back. So I'm very, very confused by something. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, almost everybody running for the Democrat nomination. Everybody on the left derides millionaires and billionaires. They deride the top 1%. They deride anybody who, wants to actually make money or make a profit. This outrage about making money confuses me, because Bill Nye, the pseudoscience guy, has a post on Instagram that goes like this.
People often ask me, Bill, why should I care about climate change? I always tell them the same thing. Because the oceans are rising, and extreme temperatures will soon cause people to leave their homes and go somewhere else. And where are they going to go? But for some reason, even that is not enough. So here it is, people. I'm going to level with you. The real reason you should do your part to combat climate change is it'll make you filthy f***ing rich. Can you imagine how much sweet, sweet cabbage you'll be piling up if you could invent a cleaner energy source or help develop carbon capture technology? The math is simple. Stacks plus stacks equals more stacks. So go green and get green. See what I'm saying? And turn off the damn lights.
See, I don't understand it. So we're told that the rich are evil, and then Bill Nye says that the reason we should support green new technology or the Green New Deal or whatever it is because it's going to make us filthy rich. Wait a minute. Have you checked that out with Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders? Or are you just going to let people become filthy rich and then take it away from them? You know, give it and take it away. That's probably what you're going to do. Yeah. Hang on. I'll be right back. Shots were fired at an Immigration and Customs Enforcement office in San Antonio. According to the Washington Examiner, police in San Antonio arrested a man early Tuesday morning in connection with gunshots fired through the windows of an ICE office in the city, according to the agency. Local law enforcement responded around 3 o'clock in the morning Tuesday to shots fired at the ICE field office located north of Interstate 410 near Brookhaven Drive, the FBI confirmed in a statement provided to the Washington Examiner. Shortly before or after shots were also fired at a nearby building. Both buildings also house businesses completely unrelated to ICE operations. No injuries reported. The FBI is opening an investigation and currently processing the crime scene and reviewing surveillance footage, according to the FBI. The cops in San Antonio told News 4 the man is believed to have fired the shots from across the highway into the windows of the building. The building does not have bulletproof windows, and at least one shot penetrated a window. FBI Special Agent in Charge Christopher Combs told reporters that the federal offices were specifically targeted. All the shots that we have found are on the floors where ICE had offices. It was a targeted attack. Combs said federal employees were there when the shot shattered the window, and by the grace of God, had the bullets gone 2 inches in another direction, we would be here today talking about the murder of a federal official. Let's see, it goes on. In this case, it's an act of violence against the federal government that could have resulted in the assassination of a federal employee. Now, political rhetoric is being blamed for encouraging violent acts against ICE. Let's see, this is according to the ICE spokesman. This attack at the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Removal Operations Field Office in San Antonio is completely without justification. Well, that's an understatement, but so be it. Political rhetoric and misinformation that various politicians, media outlets, and activist groups recklessly disseminate to the American people regarding the ICE mission only serve to further encourage these acts of violence. ICE officers put their lives on the line each and every day to keep our communities safe, he says. This disturbing public discourse shrouds our critical law enforcement function and unnecessarily puts our officers' safety at risk. Now, I would note that this is the fourth incident that has taken place at an ICE facility or office. One in Washington, D.C. on July 16, Tacoma, Washington, July 14, Aurora, Colorado, July 12. Now, I've looked, and I have not been able to find any condemnation of this incident from the two San Antonians, Joaquin or Julian Castro, which quite frankly is surprising, given that Joaquin adamantly claiming that after outing Trump donors that neither he nor his brother, quote, want anyone on the left or the right to be a target of any crazy person or any person that means them harm at all. Well, perhaps they've been focused on other pressing matters, like raising money. Or this, putting out a press release about an ad, according to the Washington Post. The ad will speak to Trump directly, linking his rhetoric toward immigrants and people of color to that of the shooter in El Paso who killed 22 and left more than 2 dozen wounded. A spokesman for Castro's campaign told the Texas Tribune that the ad, a small buy of about $2,700, will air throughout the day on Fox News in Bedminster, New Jersey, which of course is where Trump is spending the week at his private golf club. The ad sounds like this.
President Trump, you referred to countries as shitholes. You urged American congresswomen to go back to where they came from. You called immigrants rapists. As we saw in El Paso, Americans were killed because you stoked the fire of racists. Innocent people were shot down because they looked different from you. Because they look like me. They look like my family. Words have consequences. Ya basta. I'm Julian Castro, and I approve this message.
Yeah, indeed, words do have consequences. And as long as they're out there inciting the violence, things like this will continue to happen. But isn't it fascinating, or maybe it's just normalized now, that neither one of these Castro boys nor any other Democrat has come out and condemned the shooting? Why? Why? Think about that. I'll be right back. I don't know why, but I get a certain amount of pleasure when I watch, and quite frankly, whether it's Republicans or Democrats doesn't make any difference to me. But when these politicians set up all these rules, and they do the rules, particularly at the party level, so it's the Democrat National Committee or the Republican National Committee, when they create these rules in an attempt to control the democratic process by which candidates are selected. Case in point, Tom Steyer, the West Coast billionaire who is obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, has announced his 2020 bid to be president. And to the shock and to the dismay of a lot of Democrats, particularly establishment Democrats and particularly those that have already announced and are raising, $5 contributions. I mean, if I get one more email from Michael Bennett or John Hickenlooper or anybody else, oh, it's desperate times, I need $5. Or maybe if you can't do $5, can you do $1? Well, to the shock of a lot of people, Tom Steyer has met the fundraising goal to appear in the next Democratic presidential debate. Now, he still has to meet the polling requirement. So some people on the left believe he used his wealth to satisfy the donor threshold. My buddy Todd Shepard over at the Washington Free Beacon writes, Steyer meets debate donors requirement, draws complaints from the left. And he points out that Democratic presidential candidate Tom Steyer and his team announced on Tuesday his campaign had reached 130,000 individual donors, one of the critical benchmarks that candidates must reach to make the next debate 1 month from now. Now, Todd writes, if Steyer can reach the other requirement to poll at 2% in 4 qualifying polls, which seems likely given his recent rise in a number of nationwide surveys, he will become the 10th candidate to qualify for the September debates. Now, Montana Governor Steve Bullock is really ticked off about it, accusing him of purchasing his way onto the debate stage. The Steyer campaign will have nothing of it. They say that fewer than half of Tom's donations came from advertising. Now, here's what he did. He spent, and you may have seen this if you have been on Facebook at all in the past week or two, I finally clicked on, because you have the option of, don't show me this ad anymore. I watched it a couple of times, or at least saw it in my Facebook feed, and then I just got fed up with it. But Tom Steyer spent $2.9 million on Facebook ads in 30 days, begging for $1 donations. As of August 11, Sunday, I think, he's spending $140,000 per day, which I find freaking hilarious. Remember when the Democrats blamed Facebook for subverting democracy? So they turned around and they devised a system that is enriching Facebook at preposterous levels so that Well, so that one candidate can, so-called, in air quotes, subvert democracy and buy his way onto the next debate stage. He has bought 130,000 unique donors and may now qualify for the debates, all through Facebook. I hope, sincerely, I hope he makes the next qualification and that he reaches that 2% in 4 national polls or 4 recognized polls, whatever it is. I'd love to see Tom Steyer on the debate stage, the billionaire, along with all of those that decry the billionaires. Oh, yeah, get me the popcorn. I'll be right back. In breaking news, well, probably not to you, walls apparently work. There are now 57 miles of new border wall in the San Diego area that are already making a difference. Fox News reports.
A major section of barrier along the southern border near San Diego is newly reconstructed, and authorities there say already making a difference. National correspondent William Lajeunesse reports it comes during a noticeable decline in the number of migrants illegally crossing into the country.
They're making their move. As a young agent, I was watching 10 people get away for every person we caught. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people getting in. And you walk up and down this border now, it feels secure.
57 miles of new border barrier, 14 miles completed just last week, stretching from the Pacific Ocean east, according to CBP, and there is more to come.
This infrastructure freed up 150 agents every 24 hours to be shifted into more remote areas.
The fence doesn't stop everyone, but it does buy agents time. These 2 men found a hole in the secondary fence, but ran back when they saw Border Patrol. However, unable to scale the primary fence without a ladder, they're apprehended in between.
So a new wall, more cooperation from Mexico and Guatemala, all of that's having an effect on numbers. Walls work. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Sometimes there are stories that come across my desk that I look at and I scratch my head and I think, do I want to tell that story on the podcast? Or is it just too weird? And you know I like weird. But this is weird in a different way. This is actually on the Fox News website. Here's how the story goes. If you're looking for Britney Spears, which, by the way, just as a sidebar, I am not looking for Britney Spears. I am proud to say I couldn't even name you one of Britney Spears' songs. She's a singer, right? If you're looking for Britney Spears, Fox News says, you can probably find her at her local Target. Or Target. I'm sure she calls it Target. According to financial documents filed in her conservatorship. Now, that caught my attention. Why does she have a conservatorship? If anybody knows, who knows? According to financial documents filed in her conservatorship case that were obtained by The Blast, the pop star, aged 37, may be worth multiple millions, but she still loves a bargain. In the paperwork, the Toxic Singers, and they have the word toxic in quotation marks. So is that the name of a song or the tour or something? I don't know. In the paperwork, the Toxic Singers' total assets at the end of 2018 were valued at $59,079,755.76. In case you wanted the exact amount, $59 million. Thanks in large part to an impressive portfolio that includes investment accounts, mutual funds, and trusts. Despite her annual expenditures, Spears came out $2.5 million ahead of where she was at the end of 2017. I'd say that's a pretty good ROI. Then the story says this. And while she spent most of 2018 on her Piece of Me tour, which ran from July to October, she did find time to make over 80 different trips to her beloved big box store, Target. She also made a number of trips to Ralph's, which is a grocery chain, and to Home Depot, spending just over $66,000 on household supplies. Okay, there you have it. Britney Spears is worth $59 million. She had a return on investment of 2.5 $5 million for 2018, and she made 80 different trips to Target. I just figured you'd want to know. It's on Fox News, so it must be important. Hang on, I'll be right back. I was going to do a story about this Google whistleblower. If you haven't heard, Project Veritas has talked to a whistleblower from Google and apparently has some documents that show how Google's algorithms have been altered to skewer the news that anybody that uses Google to get their news. I mean, you're nuts for doing that in the first place. But if you, the whistleblower's documents ostensibly show that, and I don't know whether there's veracity in these documents or not, but if the documents are true, they tend to show that Google does skewer its algorithm to make certain that certain conservative sites are not seen when you Google certain items. May or may not be true. And I was going to do the story, and there was a short video of what's his name from Project Veritas. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. They were talking. I listened to the short interview. It didn't interest me very much. I was more interested in the documents. There was a link to the documents, so I thought, well, I'll go look at the documents. Then there's this story. San Francisco police, its bomb squad, and the FBI surrounded the residence of Google whistleblower Zach Voorhees just hours before he was scheduled to provide evidence to the Justice Department detailing how the tech giant has been manipulating its algorithms to promote an anti-Trump agenda and censor conservatives on Google and YouTube. Now, this guy is a former senior Google software engineer. Back on August 5, he was in the process of delivering a Google laptop and internal documents to the Justice Department's Antitrust Division. But apparently that got stymied. And it got stymied because San Francisco police, SWAT, and bomb squad surrounded his house. What for? Well, according to this story, the tech guru was red flagged by his former employer, according to news reports and witnesses, as well as video clips of the law enforcement operation from local TV news. The cops closed several blocks surrounding his Valencia Street residence. He said he has proof that Google created complex algorithms to hide its political bias within artificial intelligence platforms. He was going to discuss the details of his allegations in the bogus raid with this website. The video of police detaining him is included in this video, which I've watched, and it does appear, again, in this day and age, you can't believe everything that you see, let alone believe everything that you read. But if the video is correct, then local law enforcement intervened because he was deemed to be suicidal by his ex-employer, Google. So they got the local cops, of course, to raid his house. I'm sure the documents have now disappeared. I don't know how much truth there is to this or not. I just bring it to you in the event that you start hearing over the next couple of days about this Google whistleblower and Project Veritas. Well, when did the raid occur? When did they get the documents? How did they get the documents? Was this done in coordination with the Department of Justice Antitrust Division? Did somebody step on somebody else's jurisdiction in an investigation? What the hell's going on? That's all I got to say about that.
And that's all I had to say about that.
As I've said a dozen times on the podcast and on radio and elsewhere, that if you went back over the 13 years I've been doing radio and over the 80-plus episodes of this podcast, I'm certain that somebody somewhere can find something really stupid that I've said, or that I didn't say it quite clearly enough, and it can be interpreted in any number of ways. Well, Congressman Steve King of Iowa was at the West Side Conservative Club, which I assume it's some local thing in Iowa somewhere, and obviously they were on the topic of abortion. Now, I don't normally talk about abortion. It's a no-win topic. Everybody has their own positions, and I understand that. And, well, quite frankly, I've come to my whole views on abortion have evolved over the past several years, particularly since the Gosnell movie and particularly since I learned more and more about partial birth abortion. But setting all that aside, you're not going to win the abortion debate or argument with statements like this.
I held the ground on principle. Maybe we could have gotten that to the floor if I compromised. It wasn't going to move through the Senate anyway, but we still stand on these principles alive. And since then I started to think, we know the reasons why we don't accept exceptions for most of us for rape and incest, because it's not the baby's fault. But there's another thing. I started to wonder about this. What if it was okay, and what if we went back through all the family trees and just pulled those people out that were products of rape and incest? Would there be any population of the world left if we did that? Considering all the wars and all the rape and pillage that's taken place and whatever happened in culture after society, I know I can't certify that they're not part of a product of that. And I'd like to think every one of the lives of us are as precious as any other life. And that's our measure. Human life cannot be measured. It is the measure itself against which all things are weighed.
Again, I understand that people often say things that they regret or they don't understand or they're just talking off the top of their head and something insane comes out. But would there be any population of the world left if we did that? Seriously? Yeah, I think there would be some population of the world if we did that. Congressman, you can take those remarks back stat. Hang on, I'll be right back. Jihad Watch has a story out about rapes in Sweden that I wanted to share with you, since we were on this topic of there would be no population left if we got rid of all of the people who were a progeny of rape or incest. Police in the Swedish city of Uppsala, have warned women to walk in groups and to, quote, think how to behave after 4 women were raped in as many days. It's a sleepy college town, about 170,000 people. It's usually known for its universities and cathedral, but the Popo are investigating a series of sex crimes in recent days. 2 what they called completed rapes, I'm not sure what that means, took place last weekend, with another attempted rape on Saturday night and another sexual attack in the early hours of Wednesday morning. All 4 of the attacks took place at night. All 4 victims were walking alone. The police are treating the incidents as unconnected, and there's no description of the suspects. The cops, however, did release a warning. They didn't release a warning to the rapists, but they released a warning to the potential victims of the rapists. Women in town should not be worried, but must think how to behave. Feel free to walk on illuminated streets and not alone in alleys or parks. Okay, that's reasonable. Adding that because officers cannot be in all places, both men and women have to think ahead. Now, apparently, similar advice was given to women in this town before. When 4 out of 5 schoolgirls said they felt unsafe outdoors in the city earlier this year, women's rights groups called for a greater police presence on the streets instead of security advice to potential victims. I actually think this is a good point. And there's an undertone here that nobody's addressed yet. We don't know, and I want to emphasize emphatically that we do not know the religion, the ethnicity, or anything about the perpetrators. But we do know that in Sweden, there are no-go zones. And now you have a series of rapes that occur over a weekend, and the best the cops can do is to tell the women how to behave. Now, maybe that's lost in interpretation or something. But I can tell you this, if a police department in this country, in any county, just say in Douglas County, Colorado, if there had been 4 rapes and the sheriff or the local cops in Castle Rock or somewhere, Littleton, had come out and said, now, ladies, stay, walk only under illuminated streetlights. Don't go out alone at night. Watch how you behave. Yeah, there'd be outrage. Justifiably so. There would be huge outrage. Hang on, I'll be right back. Let's go to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Larry Johnson had kept a mother pig and 2 piglets in his triplex, but hooved animals are not allowed within the city. So to keep himself calm, Larry Johnson relied on Carmel, a 22-pound pot-bellied pig who enjoys blueberries and having her belly scratched. I mean, who doesn't enjoy blueberries and having their belly scratched? You wanna make it with me? Scratch my belly and give me some blueberries. But Carmel and her 2 piglets were seized by the Minneapolis Animal Care and Control Center earlier this summer, leaving Johnson alone with sadness and a $4,400 bill from the city to get his beloved pets back, at least until the window to get them back had closed last week. The pigs were confiscated from Johnson, the 59-year-old Minneapolis contractor, Air Force and Navy veteran, because the hooved animals, are not allowed in Minneapolis. City officials, however, said the problem goes further than that. The animals weren't being properly cared for, and Johnson's triplex was found to be in extremely unsanitary conditions. Well, yeah, you got a potbelly pig and 2 piglets, and all you like to do is eat blueberries and get your belly rubbed. Yeah. Seriously? When did our civilization become such that we needed emotional support animals? Now, all of the animals that I've had over my life, predominantly dogs, well, in fact, almost exclusively dogs. In fact, all exclusively dogs. They've all been close friends, family members, but I never considered them emotional support animals. Here, let me lean over. Hey, Greta the Leonberger. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You're now officially designated an emotional support animal. Yeah, send me a bill. Hang on, I'll be right back. Now, normally this is where I would do a taxpayer relief shot. But I'm going to save Uncle Joe, Agent Jet A, I've got 2 days worth of emails from him with taxpayer relief shots. So I'm going to save those for later in the week. Now, before I get to this next story about a story out of the Chicago Tribune in which a 14-year-old boy is killed. And in fact, let me pull up the headline because this is my tease. The headline is licensed gun owner shoots and kills 14-year-old boy during attempted car theft in Lake County. 5 teens charged with murder. Before I get to that story, this is also a suggestion of a listener. Let me remind you now that if you enjoy this content, if you enjoy the podcast, be sure to let your friends know. Share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, share it wherever you do your social media. You can always get the link. For example, if you subscribe to us on iTunes, iTunes will provide you a link, and you can use that link on your social media platforms to share the podcast. I would greatly appreciate it if you would do that. And the same is true if you download us on the iHeart app. And in fact, I would venture to say that every single podcast app that people use to listen to Michael Brown Unplugged has a place where you can get the link to a podcast and you can share it on your social media platform. And so I would really appreciate it if you would do that, because our numbers continue to grow. The trend line's good, but you know me, I want that trend line to be going straight up as much as possible. And if you want to follow me on social media, you know how to do that. You go to michaelbrowntoday.com, michaelbrowntoday.com, and across the bottom are all of the social media platforms. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all of that is over on the on my website at michaelbrowntoday.com. So now back to this story in the Chicago Tribune, because this story, of all the stories that I've done for a while, really ought to tick you off. It's the story about an armed homeowner that shoots and kills a 14-year-old kid while confronting a group of youths apparently attempting to steal his car from his driveway. Now, here are the basic facts out of the Chicago Tribune story. The 75-year-old homeowner went outside to see why there were people near his parked 2011 Audi and yelled at the individuals to leave. But at least one male teen moved toward him with an unknown object in his hand, officials said in the release. The homeowner fired, quote, several shots, close quote, at the subjects, according to police officer Sergeant Covelli, adding that it was possibly more than 3 shots. A 14-year-old from Chicago was wounded in the head area while he was outside the car, according to Covelli. Now, here's what's important. The sergeant said that a knife was recovered at the scene of the shooting. So knowing those facts, what is the headline on the story in the Chicago Tribune? Licensed gun owner shoots and kills 14-year-old boy during attempted car theft. Can I play editor and headline writer for a moment? What does that headline tell you? A licensed gun owner, oh, it's one of those evil concealed carry people, shoots and kills a 14-year-old boy during an attempted car theft. Well, wait a minute. Who's attempting the car theft? The licensed gun owner? Listen again. Licensed gun owner shoots and kills 14-year-old boy during attempted car theft. You could read it either way. Either concealed carry permit holder, the licensed gun owner, shot and killed the 14-year-old boy while the licensed gun owner was attempting the car theft, or the licensed gun owner shot and killed the 14-year-old boy while the 14-year-old boy was attempting the car theft. So, what if the headline instead read this? Homeowner shoots and kills knife-wielding attacker. What about that? Do you see how very subtly newspapers and the mainstream media attack legitimate gun owners, lawful gun owners, every single day in this country? How about elderly man survives nighttime mob attack at his home? That might be a good headline too. Not local man survives attack by group of car thieves. Gun owner, elderly homeowner, shoots and kills, not defends against. 14-year-old boy versus knife-wielding attacker. During attempted car theft, not while attacker advanced with a knife. I think that clearly this is a justifiable homicide. This is a reasonable use of his weapon. He feared for his life. There was a mob of teenagers. But the Chicago Tribune doesn't want people to know or believe that. They want to demonize the licensed gun owner. And they want for you to have pity on the 14-year-old boy. You know, somebody comes at me with a knife. I don't know that I'm making a judgment call or even thinking about, are you 12? Are you 15? Are you 35? No, all I see is somebody with a knife lunging and charging at me in an attempt to kill me because he and his buddies were trying to steal my car. That's what I see. Oh, by the way, did I mention that the homeowner or the gun owner was a 75-year-old homeowner who has a clean enough record to be licensed by the state of Illinois to carry a concealed firearm? How about putting that in the story? So here's the lesson for all of us. You know, we go about our lives, and I haven't mentioned this in a long time, but I've talked about how important it is for all of us to be discerning consumers of news. Because words matter. And the way words are used without, particularly if you, not most people that listen to this podcast, I don't know how many listen in Chicago, but most people don't read the Chicago Tribune. Or they don't scour websites looking for stories like I do. So if you just run across a story that says, let me find it again. I want to get this just exactly right. Licensed gun owner shoots and kills 14-year-old boy during attempted car theft. If that's all you saw, and that's all you read, would you immediately assume that the licensed gun owner did something wrong? Would you assume that the licensed gun owner was the boy was the one attempting to commit the car theft? Or would you make the assumption that the licensed gun owner had to shoot and kill the 14-year-old boy because the boy was attempting to steal his car, and wonder, well, was there anything else? Because, if somebody's stealing my car, that's not always a justifiable reason for shooting and killing someone. Those of you who understand the law of self-defense know that that's certainly just part of all of the circumstances that a district attorney or a prosecutor would look at. Licensed gun owner shoots and kills 14-year-old boy during attempted car theft. How about 75-year-old homeowner shoots and kills lunging, knife-wielding 14-year-old boy who's a member of a gang or a mob of kids that were trying to steal his car? Now, I know that's a long headline and that would never make the news, but you get the point. I use this story as a reminder. One, it's a great story about self-defense, but it's also a good story about how you have to be a discerning consumer of news. Because if all you do is read the headline, you really don't know what the story is. And even when you read the story, you have to go, let's see. Well, you might know a little bit about, he's a 75-year-old homeowner in the first paragraph, but you don't really learn about him and the knife until further in the story. Don't allow yourself to be fooled by the media. Be a discerning consumer of news. And I know that takes time, effort, and energy. But whatever time and energy you have to put into reading the news or consuming news on radio, television, podcast, wherever it is, do me a favor. Question everything. If you don't question everything, that's how outlets like the Chicago Tribune develop a false narrative that denigrates gun owners doing something lawful to save their own life. Thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care.